Let's go straight to Danny Shaw. He's a Home Affairs commentator. And Danny, thank you for waiting on the line. We have rather overran with our conversation about a very heated PMQs, but so much to talk to you about. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be there, Julia. Hi.
Well, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, was actually next to the Prime Minister today, but she's been speaking at a conference about with Balkan leaders about, well, basically security and why basically we don't have secure borders, but how the answer to that is working together internationally rather than turning inwards. But it's quite interesting to have her admit, basically, you know, our borders are not secure.
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting statement from Shabana Mahmood. And I think what she is doing is trying to kind of lay the ground as the new Home Secretary, sort of setting out what the failings are and admitting the problems. You can't try and tackle the problems unless you acknowledge, you know, that they exist and that what they're causing. And I think it's a different tone to Yvette Cooper, her predecessor. And it's why I think Shabana Mahmood, you know, may have some credibility in that role, because she's not, you know, turning away from the problems. And she completely gets how, if you can't control the borders, if you see every week hundreds of people turning up, you know, on the shores of Dover and so on, people look at it and say, well, you know, our borders are insecure, they're porous, and then we have to accommodate these people for months, if not years, while we determine if they're genuine asylum seekers or not. So I think correct to sort of lay out the challenge. The challenge for her over the coming months is to try and make some inroads in those numbers and to turn that talking shop of European leaders, the Western Balkans, invited to the summit today and so on, turn that into action rather than just talk.
Well, that's the thing. But I think the public have done with talk, haven't they? And it's two interesting stories related to both legal and illegal migrants. It's interesting. We've got illegal migrants, front page of the Sun, £260 million Serco deal for some centres for basic deportation centres near Gatwick, where basically these people are getting free arts and crafts lessons, IT lessons and English lessons before we try and deport them. I'm not quite sure why these people need English lessons. We're booting them out of the country. And at the same time, when it comes to legal migrants, we now know extraordinary stats regarding 1 in 6 universal credit claimants are migrants who've come to this country, largely EU migrants who are here completely legally, came here before Brexit and been allowed to stay and registered. But again, we've been told for years and years and years that mass migration is good for the economy. But if you've got 1 in 6 universal credit claimants are largely not working who are from abroad, that suggests to us that's not really the case.
Well, immigration, you know, went out of control under the previous government. We know that from the figures. And, you know, our infrastructure couldn't cope, resources can't cope with that, GP surgeries, schools, hospitals, etc. And communities feel that, you know, if they're struggling and if they can't get houses, social housing, then they see people coming into to where they live, then that becomes an issue. And, you know, a lot of migrants who came here will be working, but of course, it's natural after some period of time. Some people will lose their jobs. Some people will need to get credit and so on from the government benefits, etc. I mean, it's a function of high levels of immigration, Julia. That's what the figures are showing. They're just another illustration of that immigration is too high and was unsustainable.
Indeed.
And the legal migration numbers will come down because of some measures that have been taken, and also the government's raising the English language requirement so that people...
It's A-level standard instead of GCSE, as it's previously. I have to say, given that half of Brits can't manage GCSE English standard, we'll see how that goes. Just finally want to ask you about these latest figures from the College of Policing, which the BBC have got. The number of police officers dismissed from police forces across England and Wales has been revealed. It's 735 banned in the year to the end of March. It's up by about a quarter on what it was the year before. 21 struck off for child sex offences. They include dishonesty, discriminatory behaviour, unlawful access or disclosure of information, sexual offences or misconduct. I mean, this is a large number of people, but in the big scale of things, I mean, does this suggest that actually the police are getting their house in order and this is something that we should be welcoming or not?
I think the figures are an illustration that the police are cracking down on misconduct in a way that they haven't done previously. That's why the numbers have gone up, 24% increase year on year. I think that's what it shows. I think when you look at it as a proportion of the number of police officers across England and Wales, which is around 140, 145,000, it's a small proportion of that, thankfully. But clearly it is still a worry that you've got that many officers who are, committing offences or being found guilty of misconduct. But it's the reality, isn't it, Julia? You're not going to get 145,000 police officers and they're all going to be whiter than white. No. But I think the fact that, tougher action is being taken and there is now a barred list. If you go back 10, 15 years, there wasn't even a barred list where you could actually say to someone who'd been sacked by the police, you can't return and work for another force. So that is an improvement from where we are. But the figures don't necessarily reflect, I think, the fact that more police officers are committing misconduct and so on. I think it's probably a reflection that our standards are getting tighter, which is a good thing. Which is absolutely good. I think Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, thank you very much indeed for that. Claire Pearce, who used to work in the Home Office. What do you make of these latest figures?
I mean, it's always a worry when you see anything to do with police officers committing heinous crimes like that, because they should be
Wayne
the ones...
Cousins onwards.
Absolutely, they should be the ones upholding the law. But I think Danny's right. It does show that the police are trying to get ahead of the game. They are trying to sort out their own house before they sort out everyone else's.
Here's one other thing, just it comes down to this sort of brief. The government still hasn't managed to find anyone to chair this National Grooming Gangs inquiry. 4 months ago it was announced and we still don't have anyone, or even to head chair it, or even the terms of the investigation still being discussed by, we're told, a panel of stakeholders, including survivors of abuse. I mean, if you can't find anybody, I'll do it if you want.
As I say, I'll volunteer. I'll help set up the terms of reference. I've dealt with inquiries.
How is it this hard?
It isn't. It isn't that hard. I just wonder if they're approaching people who they feel will be good for it and they have turned them down.
They're approaching people who they think are not going to basically hang Labour out to dry for the fact that it was Labour councils that largely allowed this to happen. That's the reality. Tories as well, but Labour councils in particular. We'll see. I'm sure we'll talk about that another day, sadly.